the Microsoft 365 Ketchup. So my name is Sarah Fenner. I'm a Microsoft 365 trainer and a Microsoft MVP. I've been a trainer for over 20 years. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer for over 15 years now. Scary. I'm also a lot older than I was when I started. But if you want to know anything more about me, please do look me up on social media. I have quite a unique name, so feel free to get in touch. The information to put this ketchup together, we get by using these 5 sources. I am an avid follower of the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and the Microsoft 365 Roadmap. I consume those every day to look for changes. There's the Microsoft Tech Community blogs, the documentation. Oh, I need to update this slide. They've rebranded docs.microsoft.com. That still works, but it's now all falling under the Microsoft Learn banner. Learn.microsoft.com is your starting page. Okay, it's still the same great information for your more technical deep dives and your guidance. We also use the Microsoft News Stories site. All of the links for this are in the accompanying handout that will be sent to you after the session as well. Okay, this time we're a week out from Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Ignite was this time last week. And this is the main IT Pro conference. That's where we normally get the majority of the updates from Microsoft 365 from a use and administration perspective. To be honest, this year it was a little bit flat. There were more minor announcements than any big news story, but we'll go into what caught my eye from Microsoft Ignite a little bit later in the session. As I'm sure you've all come to know, the Microsoft Cloud changes daily. New announcements, new features. I actually took the download of information to prepare this session on Monday morning. Okay, there have been very few additions to the Microsoft 365 roadmap since then, and what has gone on the roadmap have been part of the announcements from Microsoft Ignite. So we're not missing anything, we're completely up to date, but look at it tomorrow, it might be a different story. Okay, so if you haven't seen the Microsoft 365 roadmap before, this is what it looks like. What I do to prepare this session is I go on and I use the download to actually pull it down into a PDF and have a look at it. But if you're interested in a particular product, you can actually run the filters yourself on that and have a look and run the roadmap yourself. And again, as I say, the link is in the chat. And you can see that, sorry, in the handout. And you can see that at the time I took the information out for the roadmap for this ketchup, there were 1,839 items on the roadmap, of which 460 are in development. So let's have a look at this a little bit more closely. So we last ran this webinar in June. Since our last ketchup, 375 items have been added to the roadmap. 483 of the items that were on or have been added have now launched or are now rolling out. And there are 247 items on the roadmap that are due to start rolling out before the end of this year. Okay, so that's quite a lot of different features. There's still a really heavy focus on Microsoft Teams, as you can see here, 24% of the updates are Microsoft Teams, but there's still quite a good focus as well into compliance, SharePoint, security. Those make up the big bulk of the rest of them. And then we've got other things like Windows 365, Microsoft Viva, the various different Office apps, the other Microsoft 365 apps, admin tools, and various other smaller updates as well. Okay, there's still a good amount of investment right the way across the board. The items I've chosen to focus on looking back to June, what's changed since June, is this list. Okay, so we've got 1 from Exchange and Outlook, we've got 4 in Microsoft Office, we've got far too many in Microsoft Teams. I can't count them off the top of my head. Another 4 in covering SharePoint, OneDrive, and Stream, which is your video platform in Microsoft 365. And then a good few focused on purview, compliance, and information protection. Now, if you remember last time, we talked about the renaming of all of the compliance features and the information protection features coming under that banner of Microsoft Purview, the Purview suite. So really, what we're talking about here is all of those features that fall in that space. Okay. Sometimes I just run through this list and tell you about a few of them. I decided to give you a slide on each, not every single bullet point, but we'll go through them one at a time. We're going to consider each section at least in turn. So bookings with me is the new feature I want to highlight across Exchange and Outlook. This is a similar service to other tools that you might have. Some of you might have used Calendly before. And this, it allows users to set up appointment types that users can book in their calendar. And then you can add a link to your email signature that takes users to your booking page. So on the left here, you can see book time with me, the link in my email signature, which takes you to my booking page, and you can book an appointment with me. Now, I've chosen to only allow 30-minute appointments. When I set it up, I chose to only to make sure there was a 15-minute gap either side of those appointments to allow them to overrun. Slightly reduce the hours of the day that people can book them into, so I get a little bit of time at the beginning and end of the day, and I've asked for 24 hours notice. So those are the sorts of settings you can put on those bookings. If you're a Microsoft 365 user and you follow the Book With Me link, when you go to the bookings page, like I've got Luke Skywalker's booking page up here, when you go to the booking page, it will show you which slots work for your calendar as well. You can sign in. If you're not a Microsoft 365 user, then following the link to a booking page allows you to see the available slots in the person's calendar you're booking the meeting with, and then make the booking. So this works across organizations. If I was booking with a colleague, obviously I'd just have a look at their free and busy time in their calendar. When I'm booking with somebody external, or someone external is asking me for time, rather than that backwards and forward of emails, I can say, please book a slot in my diary. Done. I also have secret links that allow people to book longer slots in my diary. And because I work with international customers, I have an extended hours slot as well, but those are not visible on my calendar on my bookings page. By default, I have to send you that link. Okay. So moving on then to think about Microsoft Office. And the first one I want to talk about are these simplified and classic ribbon. So first of all here, if I'm looking at my ribbon in my Office apps, there's a little drop down arrow at the bottom corner. Now this, in the web version, and currently this gives you the simplified and the classic view. Okay. Going forward into preview, you will also be able to generate this toolbar. Okay, this is now in the preview versions of Office. If you've got the preview versions, those are starting to roll out. And that automatically generates a toolbar for you based on the tools you use personally the most. And then you can customize that if you need to. So choices for work, classic and the toolbar. Then you also, if you go to more options, choose how the ribbon works, customize your toolbars as well. And then this is the new toolbar. This is mine in PowerPoint. Those are the tools I use in PowerPoint the most. You can see I'm quite a big fan of Microsoft Designer, the slide designer. Okay, so that's pinned for me automatically. If you decide you don't want to use it, you can just switch back to the classic. Okay, so just watch out for that. The other thing we've got coming are the protections on PDFs. So if I've got a sensitivity label assigned to a document and I print it to a PDF, it becomes a open document with no PDF, no sensitivity label on it. If you save it as a PDF, the sensitivity label carries forward. Okay, now because of this difference, we now have this pop-up box that recommends you save a copy instead of printing to a PDF. So when you try to print to a PDF, you will be prompted to save a copy instead, which will protect it, or put in a reason why you need an unprotected PDF. Okay, and if you put in a reason, then you can continue. It doesn't check the reason, but we can access the audit logs at a later date and see what users put in there. Okay. The other thing we've got are these comments. Now, these modern comments, as Microsoft call them, are rolling out through all of Office, all of the Office products. You can @mention people in here. That gives them access to the file and sends them a notification via email that you've asked them to do something. But these are now also going to support hyperlinks going forward, starting in Excel, strangely enough. But it will roll out to the rest of the Office suite as well, that we can put those hyperlinks in there as well. Okay. Next topic is Microsoft Forms. Now, I'm sure most of you have forms that you've created in PDF format, Word document that would work really well as a Microsoft form. And now you can import those and it will automatically turn it into a form for you. Okay, so on the Forms page, you go to the My Forms, which is a link with all forms down at the bottom. It's really hidden. But from the My Forms page, you can then choose the quick import, upload your Word or PDF document, and it'll magically generate your form. Please make sure the file is under 10 megabytes when you do this. And if you're interested in what works well, you can have a look at the input guidance, which opens this box here to show you what works. And that allows us then to analyze data that we're collecting as Excel files, build Power Automate automations behind the submission on the forms, all of which we can't do on paper forms, but going forward, we'll be able to pick that up because they're now a Microsoft form. Microsoft Forms form. Try saying that fast after a couple of coffees. Okay, moving on to look at Microsoft Teams. Wow. Well, there's a lot going on in Teams as always. Okay. Let's just zoom in on each one of these. Okay, so meeting polls in Microsoft Teams. Is that larger on screen for everyone? Oh, perfect. So when you add polls to a Microsoft Teams meeting now, you have suggestions as the sort of polls you might want to have. And there are more polls as well. The word cloud was released in the last 3 months prior to June. And then more recently, we've had the rating and ranking polls. There was a new announcement on the roadmap this morning that they're also going to add a quick poll option at the bottom of the list, which is just a yes/no answer. So the bottom of those suggestions list will be a quick poll with a yes/no answer as well. Okay, moving down on my slide. I'm sure you've all seen the join with an ID button pop up and the meeting join codes and passcodes on your invites. This is more to bring Microsoft Teams in line with other virtual meeting hosts. Okay. Personally, I don't think it adds much to the Microsoft Teams functionality because we've already, we know how to share links. People have got used to links in their calendars and so on. But there is this join with ID. If people are having trouble joining from a link, you can send them the ID and passcode. It doesn't give them a different experience with their join. It's just a different option as to how to join a Teams meeting. I know they say you shouldn't talk to yourself, but you now have chat with me. And I would suggest you send yourself supportive messages. If for no other reason than it makes quite an interesting screenshot when you're talking about it. You can send yourself messages. This will be pinned at the top of your chat. At the moment, we can't currently unpin it, but you will be able to going forward. And if you work as a guest in other organizations' tenants as well, when you switch tenant, you can also do the chat with me in the guest environment. So here, this is actually taken from my account in the Microsoft tenant, okay, because I was acting as a guest. And as someone's just commented in the chat, it is indeed very useful for sending yourself links to things to find. Personally, I use Microsoft To Do. For my links, I send links to Microsoft To Do, especially from my mobile phone. But it is a great way of reminding yourself about certain things without clogging up your email at all. Finally, we now have the meeting co-organizer role as well. That's finally rolled out to everybody. This is where you can invite people to be a co-organizer on your meeting, which gives them access to these meeting options to control the meeting, to make users attendees rather than presenters. Words went, sorry. At the moment, though, if you want people to manage the breakout rooms, that's a separate setting. So you've got to assign somebody a breakout manager role in the meeting from the breakout rooms screen and assign them a co-organizer role if you want them to be able to do everything. Two separate settings. Manage the meeting options is the co-organizer. Manage the breakout rooms is the breakout rooms manager. If you're giving them access to the meeting options, then you go into the meeting options and you add them as co-organizer. If you're giving them access to the breakout rooms, you go to the breakout rooms and in the settings there, give them the breakout room manager. And I just saw a question flick up in the chat. So can this feature be used to hand over a series of meetings when someone leaves? No, because if somebody's left, then ultimately their account will be shut down. Okay, and therefore all the meetings they've created will be deleted. So I can add them as a co-organizer for now, but ultimately you will need to recreate this meeting series. Okay. And then the last one on this slide is remove your calls from your call history. Okay, so you can delete a call from your call history. This doesn't have compliance implications. Okay. What it does is it means that users who have rung an incorrect number or have had calls come in from a number they've since blocked, they can remove from their call history the fact that they've been involved in that phone call, remove from their call history list. These items are still logged against that user. They're removing it from this view. That's why it says remove from view rather than delete. Okay, we're not deleting the record of the call, we're removing it from our call history. Slide 1 of Microsoft Teams. On to slide 2 of Microsoft Teams. Again, another really busy slide. I'm sorry, there's so much going on. So let's start with this first one. Luke Skywalker wants to chat to you. What we're starting to see with Teams is that people are using Teams to send spam messages, just like they have done over email in the past. So this feature is designed to help us weed out those spam messages. So if you get somebody send you a Teams message who you've never spoken to on Teams before, you've not been in a joint meeting with them, it's a very first contact out of the blue, then you'll be prompted to accept their message like this. You can preview the message first, so you can go, don't recognize that name, but I've got no idea if it's a spam message or not. You can preview the message, and then if it looks like it's legitimate, you can accept it. You can later block people if you need to, but initially these pops up. And as the question in the chat's just said, if the user is external only. Yeah, so your colleagues can always talk to you, even if you've never heard of them before, even if it's complete junk messages that they're sending you, your colleagues can still get through to you. This only applies to external users. In the middle here, I have got a screenshot from a video. So as I'm watching a video of a Teams meeting. Okay. Meeting recordings are now hosted in Stream on SharePoint. Okay. So you know they've moved to your OneDrive and to SharePoint rather than Microsoft Stream. We're now seeing this all be branded as Stream on SharePoint. Okay. And we're getting all of the features back that we had previously and some new ones as well. So what's new in here is the chapters. Okay, so what we can do is we can put markers into the videos for different chapters where we start discussing different topics, and you can manually break up and put markers in part way through the video. Now, if you're presenting with PowerPoint live, into a Teams meeting, it will automatically generate those chapters. Okay. One of the announcements that we had at Ignite is even more enhancements to these videos, where it's also going to start picking up where you're called out in a meeting, where you're mentioned in a meeting. It'll put that in as a marker in the meeting as well for you in the recording. Okay. The screenshot I've got at the top right here is primarily to show you that the messages, when you search for them, will now take you to the conversation rather than the single message. Okay, so if you go and search for a Teams message in Teams or from the office.com homepage, now called the Microsoft 365 app, because we've got to rename everything, then you will see the full conversation, not just the individual message. You used to get single message, now you get the full conversation. Tiny change, but a really important one. And yes, this screenshot does show one of the Ignite announcements as well, that the Office app, which is this web page, and also you have an Office app on your computer that you can pin. We're not talking about Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Those are the Office. Those are the Microsoft 365 apps. Okay, we're talking about this, the home page and the app you can pin on your computer. That will now become known as the Microsoft 365 app, singular. It doesn't really matter, but if you see the logo change, it's fine. Just remember that logo, that new logo. We're going from orange to blue, and a bit more of a bit more circular rather than rectangular. Another change to Teams is that when you select Together Mode, you can choose to select it for everybody. And you've also got this Assign Seats button. So you can choose who sits where in the Together Mode scene, if that's important. PowerPoint in Teams. Some of you may have seen that you can now insert what they're calling a cameo into your PowerPoint slides. And the cameo captures your webcam into the image. Okay, so it means you can choose a placeholder for your camera. This is great if you're recording a presentation for using PowerPoint, if you're building some distance learning, something like that. But if you're presenting with PowerPoint Live into Microsoft Teams, it takes your camera from where you are and puts it in the slide instead. Now, various different technical issues means it's much easier for me to demo this by showing you a short video, and in the notes you've got a link to the longer version of this video. So you can see here I've just chosen to present. I've knocked the sound off. I've chosen to present with PowerPoint Live, and then my webcam has moved onto the slide. And then as I move through the different slides, it would actually move my camera into different positions within the slide. Okay, so it's about a 10-minute video to show you how that all works that I've given you a link to in the handout. And I think that's going to be great for doing webinars and making it look a little bit more interesting than the square in the corner type approach. I'm not quite finished on Teams yet. Last slide on Teams. Shared channels is now live. We have on previous Ketchups discussed shared channels and the options they offer, but we now have 3 channel types in a Microsoft Teams team available to us. There is the standard channel, which is the one we know and love. We're allowed guest users. We can join, guest users can join a shared channel, a standard channel, or join a team, which gives them access to all of the standard channels with a business email address and also a consumer email address as well. We have a group mailbox in the background that stores all of the conversations that happen inside the shared channel, all of the posts, and the files are stored in a dedicated SharePoint site for that team. Okay. If you're an administrator, you're controlling the external access from the B2B collaboration settings and the guest access settings. Yep. Nothing new there. Private channels we've had for quite a long time, and these are where we can create a channel for a subset of members of the team. So you have to be a member of the team to be a member of the private channel. So all of the same controls apply. The difference is where the information is stored, in that all messages in the private channel are stored in the mailboxes of the members of the channel. And that's important if they're external guests, because that means the messaging is stored in their tenant, not in yours. Okay. And we also have a dedicated SharePoint site for that channel, rather than it being part of the same SharePoint site as the standard channels. Shared channels are the new option, and this is where we can create a channel and invite people to that channel who are not already members of the team. They can be internal or external, and you can also invite whole teams to be members of your channel. And that bit is the bit I think that is going to be most useful for most organizations. We're working in our team, and we start a joint project with another team in the organization. Do we create a whole new team for one channel? Well, in the past you have. But now that project that you're working on together, or that task, which is a shared task between 2 teams, can be managed through a shared channel. And I'm in my team, Team A, and you're in your team, Team B. The channel shows up in our teams, Team A for me, Team B for you, but it's the same channel. It is shared between those 2 teams. Okay, so there's a lot of articles out there on using shared channels between organizations, and it is a challenge to set up. Okay, a lot of compliance points to get cleared up, to get permission to set up the trust relationship between organizations to enable shared channels across organizations. But within your organization, there's no extra sharing to configure. You just need to be allowed to create a shared channel, and then you can invite another team in your organization to access the channel, and we've got a shared working space between multiple teams. I've gone through that at quite a high level, but as always, there is guidance in the handout that accompanies this, which will also be posted as a blog on the LTD site. Okay. Moving off Teams. Microsoft Stream is changing. The first thing we saw about this was our meeting recordings moving to be stored on SharePoint. Now, Stream is our video viewing tool, our video tool in Microsoft 365. Had a bit of a checkered history. It started off as video on SharePoint. It became Stream, which ran on Azure Media Services, and now it's going back to SharePoint, but we're calling it Stream on SharePoint. Okay. From a user perspective, I really don't care. I can access my videos, they play in my browser. Brilliant. But from an admin perspective, we now need to make sure that all the videos we had in the classic stream, we've still got access to when they switch it off in about a year's time. Okay. The migration tool is due to come out of preview in the next month or so. And then we have 12 months from then to migrate all of our data. There will be notifications for admins in the admin center, so please watch out for that because the exact dates may be slightly different per tenant. If you've got channels in Stream where you've stored your data, those are Microsoft 365 groups. No migration necessary. They're already in SharePoint. What we might need to migrate are personal videos, or if you've created company-wide channels inside Microsoft Stream. Those will need migrating into a SharePoint site. And the Stream migration tool, which you access from the SharePoint Admin Center, is the one that will do the job for you. Okay. So it sounds really challenging, really difficult, really confusing, but actually it's a consolidation. And also with the videos then in SharePoint, we've got all of the compliance tools, the data loss prevention, the sensitivity labels, etc., that we can apply to our video files in the same way as we treat every other file in the Microsoft 365 space. We'll then be treating video as a file as well. Two changes for OneDrive to highlight for you as well. Microsoft give us the ability to pin a shortcut from a SharePoint site into our OneDrive. Okay. And you can see here, I've got a shortcut here. This one with the little chain icon is a shortcut in my OneDrive. And if I look over towards the right-hand side, I can see which SharePoint site that's coming from. Okay. That means if we're using the OneDrive sync tool, we don't need to synchronize a separate SharePoint site as well. And it just shows up as a folder in our OneDrive. The challenge has always been that most people were linking a library from SharePoint called Documents. So in their OneDrive, they had all of these folders called Documents, and they didn't know which one was which. But now, once you've linked your library over to your OneDrive, you can rename it and call it what you will. It has no impact on the library where it sits originally. But in my OneDrive, I can give it a different name just for me so that I know what it is. And that's a really helpful option. In the purple box on this slide, I'm showing request files. You may or may not have come across the request files feature, but this allows me to create a folder in my OneDrive and generate a link that allows people to simply upload files into that folder. Okay. This is really good if you're working in an organization which doesn't allow you to access links to files or access large files via a link from external. You can give users a link to a folder in your OneDrive, and people can just upload files into there that they need you to see that are too big. Yeah. The challenge up until now has been that you had to have anyone links for your OneDrive enabled to use the request files feature. Okay, and that is a potential security concern. We now have, drum roll, the ability to configure request files links without enabling the anyone link, the anyone sharing for the OneDrive. Now, it does need to be done by PowerShell at the moment, and we've given you the article as to how to do that if you want to pass that on to your SharePoint admins, but ultimately the setting will be available from the same place in the SharePoint admin center that we configure external sharing generally. Microsoft up until now themselves have not allowed the request files feature for their staff because of the need to open that anyone sharing link. But now even Microsoft have opened up the request files link, and therefore if you talk to anyone at Microsoft ever, you'll start to see them having a link in their email signature to say, if you need to send me a file, please use this link to upload it to my OneDrive. You'll start to see that appearing, and I think that's a really great usage example of the feature. Information protection and compliance, also known collectively as Purview. Nothing major really to highlight here. A couple of tweaks, but very useful tweaks, I think. So if we're creating data loss prevention policies, we quite often create a policy that's very similar to another with perhaps a different set of data, a different set of exceptions. And so you end up recreating the same similar policies over and over. We can now copy an existing policy and base our new policy on the copy. Yeah, so we can do a copy and tweak the copy. That is going to save me hours and hours and hours. So I'm really happy about that one. The other thing that is a slight change is if you've used retention tags in Microsoft Exchange to manage when email gets archived and deleted, those we used to access through the Exchange Admin Center, they've now been pulled into the Purview portal, which used to be called the Compliance Center. And they sit with all of the other retention options under data lifecycle management in the Purview portal. The intention here is to get people to use the more modern retention policies rather than the legacy, the traditional Exchange retention tags. There is still a feature deficit in the retention policies, compared to the retention tags from Exchange. I can't use Microsoft 365 retention policies to archive email. Okay, so by default, your email, once it's a certain age, moves into the online archive. If your organization has the correct Exchange plan, it does anyway. The appropriate Exchange plan is a better way of saying that. And the retention tags cover when those emails move into those archive folders. The other thing retention tags do that the Microsoft 365 retention policies can't is they can be applied to specific folders. So junk mail, deleted items are emptied after 30 days by default in Microsoft 365 because of the retention tags assigned to those folders. So we're not quite there yet to replace it, but by moving it here, Microsoft are giving us an indication of intent, if you like, that the retention policies will replace the Exchange legacy retention tags. The final image I've got on this slide is and I was going to put my laser pointer on, but I'm a little bit worried about the red laser pointer on the pink background. But anyway, here we go. This final image, that clashed, is taken from an e-discovery search. Okay. Many of you might not realize you can actually put sensitive information types into your e-discovery search criteria. But up until now, if you've built your own custom sensitive information types and used the feature of exact data match, this didn't work. It now does. So for those people who think I'm talking Martian, let me take a little bit of a step back. Sensitive information types are where Microsoft 365 recognizes certain types of information which can be classed as sensitive. Things like credit card numbers, bank account numbers, passport numbers, full names, addresses, those sorts of things. As organizations, we can build our own. So, for example, our employee numbers, or customer numbers. But they tend to follow a pattern which is not totally unique in the world. So we also link up those custom sensitive information types where we've given the pattern to letters or numbers, for example, to an actual list of the employee numbers that we have, matching it up to the exact data that indicates it is a sensitive bit of information. Hence, it's called exact data match. So if you've built those in your tenant, you couldn't use those in your e-discovery search in the past. You now can. Okay. Right. Couple of changes when we're building retention labels as well. At the end of the retention period, you can now change the retention label. You may have also noticed a change to the screens as you're setting up retention labels, that we've now got a multi-step approach in those screens. And one of the reasons we've got that multi-step approach is to give us these extra options as to what happens at the end of the retention period. Changing the label is available to all tenants which have access to retention under data lifecycle management. So that's pretty much everybody. Okay. And there are also some changes to what happens during the retention period. If you have an E5 license that includes records management functionality, in that you can mark the items as a record, but set it to be unlocked at the start. Okay, so let's think about this. I'm writing a contract and I want to tag it with the appropriate retention label as I'm creating it, so I don't forget to tag it. Okay, that means that that document would be locked automatically right at the start because it's a record, and then I'd have to go and manually unlock it. So now when we set up these retention labels, we can set them to be unlocked by default, and then people can lock the record down once they've finished working on the document. This is obviously going to be a real change from a user perspective, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense to tag the document with the appropriate retention label that will declare the item as a record. And then once it's finished being created, you lock it at the end. So tag it at the start, lock it when it's done. Okay. This does not apply to items which are marked as regulatory records. This only applies to standard records. Okay, and you do still have in those records labels, if I just go back, that option to change the label at the end of the retention period as well. I'm doing quite well. I'm over halfway through my slides, and we're not quite halfway through the time. I'm getting there. Okay, so communication compliance. If you're not familiar with communication compliance, this is a Microsoft 365 E5 feature that monitors communications and looks for inappropriate communications. One of the challenges is these automated detections of abusive language and different types of documents to flag in communication compliance doesn't pick up everything. So now users have the ability to report a message in Teams which is concerning as a conversation to be looked at under communication compliance features. How this works is that a policy is created in communication compliance, being generated automatically. You don't need to do anything with it, apart from assign who's going to be responsible for reviewing matches in that policy. And then any user who has an E5 license will automatically be able to report a concern. Now, if you don't want your users to be able to do this, it can be disabled through the messaging policies in Microsoft Teams. The report a concern option is enabled by default, but you can disable it if you don't want your users to be able to use that feature. Okay. The only users who can report messages, as I say, are those with an E5 license, because communication compliance is part of that license. Sorry, quick drink of water, get a dry throat. Another thing that's coming, and again, this is a little bit small. Let me just zoom in a bit for you. Okay, is that we have a number of different trainable classifiers that are being released. They're currently released into preview, which means Microsoft can withdraw the feature. Okay, anything released in preview is something you can use, but bear in mind it may change and may be withdrawn. It normally isn't. Normally when it's released in preview, it just sits there for a little bit while they test it to make sure it does work and refine the functionality. Trainable classifiers are designed to spot certain types of content, documents, emails, messaging. And one of the new ones that rolled out in the last 3 months prior to Microsoft Ignite was the customer complaints classifier. So it's designed to recognize messages, letters, emails of complaint. The other ones that are sat there in preview are there because I took the screenshot after Ignite, and you can see there's 1 or 2 more. Now, trainable classifiers aren't just used in communication compliance, they can also be used for data loss prevention policies and automatic sensitivity labeling as well, and retention and e-discovery. But they are an E5 feature. Okay, so. And the screenshot you've got here is shown from the creation of a communication compliance policy where I'm looking to say detect conversations, detect communications that match this trainable classifier. Moving on to talk about sensitivity labels. I've actually cheated here. This slide has got a just released and a coming soon feature on it in one go. So on both of these, you can see the ability to set colors on your sensitivity labels. We used to have this in Azure Information Protection, okay, and it hadn't come across into sensitivity labels till now. So when you create a sensitivity label, you can create a color. You can attach a color to that label. And when your users are applying sensitivity labels, they will see the colored blob next to it. The coming soon bit is this more prominent position for your sensitivity labels. So your sensitivity labels, it wasn't always obvious what a document was labeled. Occasionally you got a banner below the ribbon, or you went to look at the sensitivity button to see what had been assigned. This screenshot is showing you the title bar of a document. It's a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. And you can see that I've clicked onto the area where the file name shows up, and I can rename the file, I can change the location, and I can also change the sensitivity label. And next to it is telling me what sensitivity label is already assigned. So it's much easier to see what's assigned. It's much easier to change it because it's there at the top of the screen, in the middle of the screen for you automatically. So coming soon. You will not only have the colors, but you'll be able to see it front and center. That is a Microsoft Office update, and I believe that is due to roll out in the next monthly update to Microsoft Office. Or if you're on the 6 monthly update, it will be the March update. Okay, because we've just had the September update of Microsoft Office. Yes, I know this is far too small to read, but it's in the handout if you need it. Okay, talking about sensitivity labels, Microsoft have said that they are going to retire the information protection add-in. Now, if you use the sensitivity button in Microsoft 365, you've got nothing to worry about. But if you've downloaded the information protection add-in to apply a sensitivity label, an information protection label to your content, Microsoft have announced that that will retire Okay, so you will need to make sure that you start using the Microsoft 365 apps, which have the sensitivity label button within it. Okay. Something to watch out for if you're on a journey from Azure Information Protection to sensitivity labels. That was the last 3 months. Then, last week, we had Microsoft Ignite. For all of their major conferences, Microsoft publish what they call the Book of News. There's always hundreds of blog posts as well that go into detail, and people like me who are absolutely fascinated with the technology always write loads of articles as well. So there's loads of different ways of consuming it, but the Book of News is probably the shortest way. Well, apart from giving me the next 20 or so minutes of your time. Okay. Here we go. Here's my big long list. Okay, so this isn't everything. What I've done is I've pulled out what I think are the highlights of the new features. So Microsoft Teams. If you are a Microsoft Teams user in a smaller organization, you will now be able to use Business Central. Business Central is part of the Dynamics 365 suite of products, or family to be more precise. And it's aimed at smaller businesses, and it looks at finance, sales, shipping, project management. Okay, so your enterprise management tool. And the reason for this is it integrates with Teams from a customer management perspective. They want us all to use Viva Sales. So they're trying to get us into the Dynamics space so that we start moving through and integrating our consumer and customer conversations into Teams as well. If you already use Dynamics 365 customer service, then your Teams chat will be embedded in Dynamics 365 customer service. So you'll be able to chat to your customers from Dynamics with a Teams conversation. The one I'm most excited about is the avatars. Sorry, I know it's really sad, but instead of having my camera on, I can now turn up as an avatar. This was me during a Microsoft Ignite session. I was lucky enough to moderate the Ignite session on avatars. And I think that there's a bit of divided opinion here. You know, if you don't want to be on camera, as I mentioned right at the start, I love talking to people. I like to see people, but it's not everyone's comfortable being on camera, especially if it's been recorded, or you know, you're trying to focus on the session and you don't want to be observed while you're focused. And therefore, this avatar is kind of a nice halfway point. People who are not comfortable being on camera, you know, there's all sorts of mental health reasons why you might not want to be on camera. There's physical health reasons why people might not want to be on camera as well. So I think the avatars are a nice replacement. You can have your camera off, you don't even need a webcam, you can build yourself an avatar. But it is the first step for Teams into the world of virtual reality. So what comes after that is those virtual reality meetings where if you're in a Teams meeting like this with lots going on, you have to listen to me. You can't talk to the person next to you. But if you're in a virtual reality space, you can physically take a step back and talk to the person next to you. You can still hear what's going on in the main presentation, but you can have that conversation without disturbing the rest of the meeting. So these avatars are kind of our first step down that road. And we are looking at those immersive meetings, Microsoft are calling them, coming over the next year or so. Okay. Microsoft also announced a new Teams license called Teams Premium. Now, Teams Premium is mainly focused around webinars and meetings, and looking at meeting security as well. The idea behind it is if we organize webinars and meetings, the person who sets them up would have the Teams Premium license, which would activate the features in the meeting because we've set it up and we've got the license. So if I set up this webinar, I've got Teams Premium license. All of the premium features are in this webinar. We can put a watermark across the shared content. So if we're sharing something sensitive and you take a screenshot and distribute it, we know it was you because your name was all over the watermark. Okay, so in a lot of industries working with sensitive content, that can be a useful feature in some scenarios. If you're running something like this, a webinar, we can have a green room where the presenters can get together and talk, and also the ability to curate what content you're seeing on screen. I can ask you all to switch your cameras on, but because I've got the ability to curate what you see on screen, the other attendees will only see me and my fellow presenters, not each other. Okay, so we can have people with cameras on, but they're not on stage, so we can see them. We've also been able to set up templates or guides for meetings with all of the different settings in the meeting options as we need to configure them. Sensitivity labels to be assigned to meetings as well to protect the information within it, so it can't be shared outside of the authorized group. Those are all the sorts of features we're going to see in Teams Premium. Teams Premium will be available in a preview, so for free, next month, and it's due to go to general availability in February, and currently they're talking of about $10, which I think was £9.60 UK. So $10 US per user per month. Okay, as I say, there is a link all about that in the handout if you want to know more. And as it starts to release, obviously it's something we'll feature in future Ketchups. Excel Live, you may have seen announcements about previously. This went full availability from Microsoft Ignite. This is where you can share an Excel file in a meeting like you can use PowerPoint Live. So like PowerPoint Live, it's not using the same bandwidth as screen sharing. And everybody in the meeting doesn't have to open the file as well. They can edit it in the meeting. So you can collaborate on the file in that shared meeting stage. Okay. Yes, we've been able to get the same effect by screen sharing and all having the file open as well. But now we're keeping the focus in the meeting. There's an update to Teams channels coming as well. Channels 2.0, they're calling it internally. I don't think that's actually what they called it officially. But the updated channel experience is basically rearranging your channel. So your messages, your newest message will be at the top, as will the compose box. Bit like your email. We'll also have a side pane in the channel, which shows us pinned messages, who's in the channel, description of the channel as well. So really making it a little bit easier to see different message types, expanded reactions. So at the moment, you can only give hearts and thumbs up on a message. Well, you can use every emoji going in the new version of the channels. Please remember you're at work and don't use the inappropriate emojis. For some reason, my colleagues, and I should actually clarify that, some of the fellow MVPs I've been working with who've used this feature seem to like the poo icon. No idea why. I don't really feel it's a work-appropriate emoji. So please stick to work-appropriate emojis when you're reacting to your Teams messages. Why that one, I don't know, obviously. An age thing, shall we say. Okay, moving on to Microsoft Edge. I don't know about you, but I regularly open a series of tabs in my web browser and then collect all the links and share them to colleagues. And then we all end up with the different tabs open, working on them. And then someone says, oh, what was that one again? Oh, I've closed that one. Well, shared workspaces allow us to set up a collection of tabs, websites that we want to open, and share that collection. So we can open that workspace of all of those shared tabs. Simple idea, but I think that's going to be really powerful. The same with the typo protection. I can't spell Microsoft. Can't spell Microsoft to save my life. And the number of times I end up on the wrong website because I've mistyped it and suddenly go, this is not the real website. Now, the website typo protection is going to send me to the right website because it's going to spot that I've mistyped it. Captions. Edge will allow you to switch on or automatically switch on captions when you're consuming anything with audio. Okay, so if you're watching a video or you're listening to the radio or anything like that, you can turn on captions in your web browser. So it doesn't matter if the service provides it or not, and you can view those captions. Okay. You may have also noticed if you've got the most recent update to Windows 11, there is actually a captions app in Windows 11. Okay, now, and you can actually turn on captions for any sound you've got coming through on your computer for any application that you're running. Okay, so that's built into the October update of Windows 11. So Microsoft are focusing quite hard here on accessibility. I personally use captions a lot if I'm in a noisy environment and I'm struggling to hear. There was a lot of announcements. Right, new products, Microsoft Places. No idea yet on the licensing for any of these products. So something to be aware of as we talk about this, the details of licensing and release dates are not clear on these at all yet. So Microsoft Places is a tool to help with hybrid working. Okay, so it's designed to look at helping teams of people build a calendar of when they're in the office and out of the office. So if all of your colleagues are in the office, it's going to suggest you go into the office that day as well, rather than work from home. Also, to help organisations as they collect information on how their offices are now being used going forward in this world of hybrid work, what amount of space they need, recommendations on layouts, recommendations to individuals on when to leave the office for optimal travel time, where you can meet your colleagues, those sorts of things. There was a really nice little video of what it's going to do. You have to watch it about 6 times to try and work out all of the features that it's going to offer. But that looked quite interesting, and integrating with features in Outlook for replying to where you're attending meetings, whether it's online or in person. That would be quite useful. Building on AI features is the Microsoft Designer product. And the idea here is that I put in a text description of an image that I'm trying to create, and it will design it for you. It will draw it. Okay, so again, some really nice little videos of building presentations and marketing, brochures and materials through that. Microsoft Loop is also going to be an app. We've seen Loop components in Teams chat where we can build a table in the chat and post it, and people can update that table without having to copy and resend the message. And so they update it within the original message. So those Loop components are coming to Outlook. They'll be coming to the Office apps as well. But there will also be a Microsoft Loop app as a way of pulling together all of those little bits that we're working on. Now, where that differs from Teams remains to be seen. So there's a bit of work still to do around when would you use the Loop app versus when would you use a shared document versus when would you use a Microsoft Teams team. I mentioned the Microsoft 365 app changing. So what we currently have installed on our Windows devices as the Office 365 app will be rebranded the Microsoft 365 app, and some tweaks to the interface there to make it even more useful to use on your computer rather than just going to the office.com homepage. I could talk about Microsoft Viva for an hour. In fact, I did the session I presented at Ignite was on Microsoft Viva. But what we're seeing here is integration across all of the different apps, and changes to the Viva Connections app to make it easier to navigate to other tools within the Microsoft Viva suite. This was also part of an announcement that Microsoft held separately on the 22nd of September. So again, all sorts of information for links on that, and if people are interested in knowing more about Viva, do let us know and we'll add it as one of our focuses for future Ketchups. Up until now, I've focused primarily on the kind of user specific and the compliance specific features in these Ketchups and highlighting other really interesting features, but we can look to expand if that's what people are interested in. So across Microsoft Office, 2 things caught my eye. If you use Project for the Web, the tasks in there will now integrate with Planner and Microsoft To Do. So if you're assigned a task in Project for the Web, it'll go and sit with all your other tasks. And also the meeting recap that we get in Teams. So when you go to go to your Teams calendar, you can see the attendance, the recording and the transcript. That information will come over to Outlook. Please don't confuse this with one of the features of Teams Premium that I haven't mentioned yet, which is the intelligent meeting insights that are going to be offered, and that is the tool that is going to highlight where you were mentioned in a meeting. It's going to pull out tasks that people discussed in a meeting. So like I've asked everybody to tell me what they would like going forward, that would be generated as a task. and assigned to everybody who attended the meeting. Only going to work with internals to start with, but the scope going forward. So please don't confuse that meeting recap in Outlook with all those extra features of Teams Premium. This is just the current attendance record, recording and transcript that you see in your meeting in Teams calendar coming over to your Outlook calendar. My avatar's gone. I do have a sensible one without the silly hat on as well. You'll be pleased to know you don't have to dress up like a Microsoft branded avatar to use them. So around security and compliance, there were actually far fewer announcements than in previous Microsoft Ignite. There's a lot of refinement of functionality. So we had a renaming announcement about Microsoft Intune. This is an area that's always quite interesting. Endpoint or device management. When we first got the features, Microsoft called it Intune. Now, Intune is the product that we use to manage devices over the internet. Okay. But there are other tools in the Microsoft world that you can use for device management as well. And these were all collected together under endpoint management. And just like Microsoft have rebranded all of the security tools into Microsoft Defender and all of the compliance tools into Microsoft Purview, we're now rebranding all of the device management products under the Microsoft Intune suite with a view to announcing enhanced functionality and tools and products under that whole banner of Microsoft Intune. So if you see lots of confusing things going on, reading blog posts about Intune and endpoint management, please remember it's now the suite of device management products. Audit search. We now have an improved audit search with an expanded set of activities that we can search over. This is part of both the Defender and Purview portals, so it comes under security and compliance. You can switch it on in preview and use it today, okay? Or you can go back to the classic audit search as well. So the audit search is now much faster and has an expanded range of activities that we can discover without needing to go and use the programmatic interface into the Microsoft Graph and running complex scripts and so on. So that's good for those of us who don't like the Graph API. You're a developer and what I've just said makes sense to you, carry on. If you're not, go and use the audit search. We're also seeing some changes around e-discovery. Now, these are things that were kind of previously indicated were coming, but are now fully available. So premium e-discovery will now capture the version of a document shared in a message, be that a Teams message or an email, whether it's an attachment or a link. So it will showcase the right version of the document as it was when it was shared. It will also capture reactions to Teams messages. So where you're putting the thumbs up, the heart, etc., or that expanded set of emojis onto messages, those will be discoverable. Those will be shown with the messages when we run an e-discovery premium search. Did you know that if you're working in Teams, in the Files tab, you can now pull up the document information pane and apply the retention label? So if you go to the Files tab in Teams, on the right-hand side, you will have a little I button, tiny little I in a circle, the letter I for information. And you can change the retention label now directly in Teams. So many users are working on files through Teams now. That's a really useful feature. You can change all the other metadata as well, all the other properties. But from a security and compliance purpose, it's the retention label that we've struggled with there. I showed you how we can change the retention label currently at the end of a retention period. Going forward, we'll also be able to program an action, an automation using Power Automate. Now, if your organization doesn't have E5 licenses, you can't do document disposition approval. Not built in. That's an E5 feature. But what we will be able to do going forward is, instead of automatically deleting the document, we can build a Power Automate workflow to notify people that the end of the retention period has been reached, and then build in your own process for handling that document at the end. So that brings a lot of flexibility. The advantage of the disposition review is that it's logged within the audit search. Okay, so that E5 functionality does still add power because of the logging of the disposition of the document. Okay, but Power Automate does bring you other options. And we remain to see what those actions are. It may be that we can introduce the Power Automate workflow and at the end of it trigger a disposition review. That might be one of the actions we can pull in, so we can get the best of both. So it remains to be seen exactly how that's going to work, but I can see a lot of flexibility as to how you handle the end of a retention period from that. I was also quite taken with the idea of being able to restrict printing of documents to specific printers. So using a data loss prevention policy, we can say if it's got this sensitivity label, this retention label, this sensitive information in it, you can only print it on that printer. Yeah? So that we can make sure that our most sensitive content is not being turned into paper and leaked that way, because we can restrict access to the printers that are being used. So I think that's quite a powerful function, although it's quite a small announcement. And then, as I said, sensitivity labels on meetings will require both the Teams Premium and Microsoft 365 E5 licensing. But that will allow us to restrict access to meeting content. Things like the meeting chat, documents that are shared in a meeting, presentations that are attached, files that are attached, polls and the poll results, all of that content. So again, another minor change, but a very powerful impact. There were other announcements at Microsoft Ignite, but those I think are the key highlights. And obviously, as those features start rolling out, we will feature those in future Ketchups as well. And before I go into the final stretch of this presentation, I would just say, if you're registering for the Ketchups and there's a particular feature that you've heard about that's rolled out, please do get in touch and let us know, and we'll do our best to feature it if we have enough notice, if it's something you're interested in. Right, so the next 3 months, what are we expecting? So from Outlook, we're expecting cloud signatures. This is where your email signatures can be set in one Outlook client and available everywhere. Yes, thank you. I use so many different devices. I'm a total geek. I'm really sorry. Well, I shouldn't apologize for it. I enjoy it. But one of my challenges is always, oh, that email signatures are not on this machine. Let's go and find an old email and copy it. And oh, it's going to save me so much time and effort. Love that. Please do just make sure in your Outlook options you have got ticked use the cloud for your options because it will be part of that. I can't remember the exact setting. We will look it up for you. But if you go into File and Options in Outlook, there is a tick box now in the options and your Outlook client that allows you to synchronize your settings with the cloud, and the signature synchronization will rely on that being ticked. Okay. Top tip to prepare. Loop components in an email. So I can email my colleagues and say, please fill in this table of all of the wonderful jobs you're going to do for me over this, on this webinar that we're doing, or this event that we're arranging, or fill in this table as to who's working where this week. And rather than sending it backwards and forwards, so we have to work out the last email, they just update it. Just update the table, update the list. So we've got one email and it's got the most up-to-date information in it because the loop component can be updated without having to send a new email. So that's going to be really good. Your working hours and your location. So rather than just saying I work 9 till 5, we're going to have more flexibility here to say which days you're working from home, which days you're working in the office, which days you're working from somewhere else, without having to put appointments in, or if you're working flexible hours, because this is one of the challenges of hybrid working. Not, taking advantage of that flexibility, but still being able to effectively interact with our colleagues. So that's going to be quite a useful feature. Your avatars will arrive in the next 3 months, as will Teams Premium. Okay. Magnify a slide in PowerPoint Live. So when I'm presenting in PowerPoint, I can put the magnify on and I can magnify the slide. I'll be able to do that through PowerPoint Live. Now that's one of the reasons I still haven't fully embraced PowerPoint Live. It's it uses far fewer resources in your meeting. Okay, but I can't Zoom. Okay, I also stick to mainly sharing my screen because I quite often switch from the presentation into a different screen. And that's still a little bit of challenge. The other thing is when you're planning a meeting in the Teams calendar, you can't go anywhere else because that meeting is the Teams window. You'll now be able to pop out that meeting you're creating into its own window and go and use other things in Teams as well. Again, a minor change, but that's going to be big for productivity. DLP should now feature and not or in their conditions. So we're going to have much more flexibility to accurately describe what we're trying to capture in our data loss prevention policies. So the ability to pick up more trainable classifiers, enhancement as to how it shows up in Content Explorer and alerts so we can see what was matched and where the match is in the content that's being shared. Scope sensitivity labels to the client application. So you can have different sensitivity labels for Word documents, as to emails, as to Excel files. So you can say this label only applies to Excel files, so I'm only going to publish it for use in Excel. And then across SharePoint, Stream, Viva, and OneDrive, videos placed on a SharePoint page will play directly in the page. The Viva Connections app is being updated, as I say, to give more of that navigation across Microsoft Viva. You'll be able to personalize your Viva briefing email by favoriting or snoozing sections. So if it lands and it's telling you all about the meetings you've got today and you don't find that useful, you can snooze that section. The sensitivity label in the file sharing dialog box. When I go to share a file, it'll remind me what the sensitivity label is, so whether or not I'm allowed to share that file or not. That's going to be, again, a really useful feature. And then further out, items that are due next year. The nested Microsoft 365 groups that we've mentioned on previous Ketchups, where we can say you're a member of a group if you're a member of another group. That's due by the end of 2023, so that's probably going to sit on my further out for most of next year. Virtual reality meetings in Teams, those immersive meetings that we were talking about. E-discovery support for finding items in the recycle bin. I didn't mention Microsoft Syntex in my Ignite announcements, but one of the interesting things that Syntex is going to offer, and Syntex is an add-on license to SharePoint. It used to be called SharePoint Syntex, was rebranded to Microsoft Syntex. And the Syntex toolset will offer you the ability to archive content into cold storage, so a cheaper, slower access performing storage solution. No details on exactly what that is or what the costing is going to be, but the idea is that we've got that much data in Microsoft 365 now that organizations are starting to pay for more and more data. Okay. Multiple home sites is allowing us to set different landing pages for different parts of the organization, especially useful for international organizations with multilingual requirements. This one is a selfish one, Microsoft To Do on the Apple Watch. I love Microsoft To Do. All of my tasks go in Microsoft To Do. I am a slave to my watch, although I do take it off when I'm presenting so it doesn't buzz at me. So that's, I'm looking forward to that one. Maybe not everybody else. Improvements to the export of e-discovery search results. That e-discovery search tool is, export tool, sorry, is so old now. It's so clunky. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do with that. And setting the sensitivity label on an email based on the sensitivity label of the file you attach. So if I attach a protected file to an email, it will protect the email itself with the same protection. A simple idea, but again, very powerful. I have thrown an awful lot of information for you, at you. Does anyone have any questions? Obviously, you're being recorded, but feel free to come off mute and ask a question, or to post it in the chat if you're not comfortable doing so. Alex, go ahead.
Yes, I did put this in the chat before, and it's my ongoing obsession to try and find out more about these meeting recordings, and we still need to sort it out internally. But are the meeting recordings, are they going? Because last time we said they were going in OneDrive. Are they going to go into SharePoint now?
Okay, so if you set up the meeting, the recording goes into your OneDrive.
Yes.
Okay. Or the OneDrive of the person who records it, if they're inside your same organization. They will be consumed by Stream on SharePoint.
Yes.
As in, they will be presented through the Stream interface, but they're still going to be stored in your OneDrive.
So we still have to move them to ensure we can retain them based on the retention of where we're going to move them to.
If you want to control retention differently than just your OneDrive settings, then yes, you have to move them to wherever you want to have retention policies in place to govern those. Yeah, or apply a retention label.
Yeah, and when's this Stream on SharePoint coming? I know you did talk about it, but
so Stream on SharePoint is live now.
Do we? Yeah, because I've never seen this until you mentioned it today. Within our tenant.
So this is the new Stream on SharePoint. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, I'll have to look because I've not, because we've got loads of stuff in Stream, loads of my training videos and stuff.
Yeah, I mean they're perfectly safe. They should all still be there. It depends whether when you use the Stream Classic you created a company channel or a Microsoft or a group channel. It depends quite where they were put. But what this is basically now doing is looking across all of Microsoft 365 for the videos you have access to.
Yes.
Okay. Including, you can see here, a video I uploaded into a Teams chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Meeting recordings.
So it's just a way of seeing them all together. So it doesn't matter where you move them to from OneDrive to a folder, they'll still appear there.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification with that.
Yes.
But it was an excellent session, just a lot to take in. So when I get my notes from you, I'm going to be reading it in detail, and I can share the applicable points out to my colleagues. So thank you for that. I'll go back on to mute.
Thank you. We've got another hand up, Matthew. You want to come off mute and ask a question? Oh, your hand's disappeared.
Yeah, hi. No, I had my hand up. Thanks. So it's just a really quick question. I do know I joined a little bit late to the session, so you might have already answered this, but for document labeling, I'm just interested to know if there's any way that the Office 365 software or the Purview, can be set up to automatically apply labels and so policies to some of that information. So for example, if the document creator was based in a radiology department in a hospital, tags for radiology and hospital name may be applied based on the metadata of that particular document. Is that something that's possible, or is that something you'd have to manually set up?
Okay, that depends on your licensing.
Yeah, okay.
If you have a Microsoft 365 E5 license, and the user has a Microsoft 365 E5 license, then you can set up automatic labeling rules for sensitivity labels. Okay. You can also set default labels for locations now as well.
Okay.
So if I just go back into here, if I go to a SharePoint site and go into a document library, too many different identities, that's my problem. Let me just approve my sign in. Using passwordless sign in, of course, with my authenticator app, because it gives me a number. Yeah, so nice and secure. Unless you've got my phone, you can't get in. my phone, my face, and my fingerprint, I should add. Okay, so if I now go up to the library settings in this top corner here,
Okay.
I can set a default sensitivity label for a library, and that doesn't require an E5 license.
That doesn't require an E5. Okay.
No. So there's nothing new there apart from, I think we covered the default sensitivity label last time. If I didn't, we just have. But the rules for the automatic labeling, as I say, does require E5.
Okay, no, that's useful. At least I can look more into that based on knowing it's an E5 licensing requirement as well. Thank you.
And as I say, the default labeling, you can also use that with Teams as well. So you can open your Teams files SharePoint site and set a default label, which will apply to all channels, all standard channels in your team if you set a default label on a library.
Useful information. Thank you, Sarah.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm 8 minutes early. Woo! How's that for timing? No, please do feel free to pop your questions in the chat. Julian, is that a hand up?
It is. I just wanted to say thanks very much, Sarah. Lovely to meet you last weekend at the summit. Oh, what a lot of information to try and take in. But I will listen to the recording and I might well come back to you with a couple of other questions. But just thanks again. That's really useful.
And there's also the handout that we'll send out to go through as well, which includes the links with more information in.
Brilliant work. Thanks.
On top of that, please, if you are interested in going deeper into any of the topics, please do be aware of obviously the training courses as well as the webinars that we're running. And if you have questions about any of the courses or you need to get in touch, please do get in touch through the various different offices, depending where in the world you actually are. And obviously follow us on social media as well, because that's where we advertise all of these things. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you very much.